Close your eyes and let the waves of time carry you away. Tonight, we drift not into dreamless sleep, but into a mystery that has haunted the pages of history for over 7 centuries. A fleet of ships vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no records, no return. The year was 1307. The Knights Templar warriors of God, guardians of secret knowledge, had just been betrayed. As their strongholds fell across France, something else slipped quietly into the night. Their legendary fleet. 40 ships, fully stocked, fully manned, and then gone. Where did they go? Did they vanish beneath the waves? Sail to a secret land? Or were they hiding something the world was never meant to find? Tonight, as you rest your body, let your mind wander through storm-swept ports, hidden coves, and whispered legends. Follow the trail of a fleet that may still haunt the deep. This is the story of the missing Templar fleet, and the question that still echoes across time: where did they go? A fleet into fog. The port of La Rochelle stood silent beneath a pale October moon. It was the year 1307, and the winds off the Atlantic coast whispered secrets no one dared speak aloud. On the docks, 40 ships sat anchored, their sails drawn tight, their hulls loaded with cargo that no manifest listed, and no captain dared describe. The Templar fleet and some mighty force that connected the Order's holdings across Europe and the Holy Land was ready. Ready for what? No one could say. The world was shifting. That much was clear. On the morning of Friday the 13th, now infamous King Philip IV of France, driven by greed, debt, and fear, had moved against the Knights Templar. Across France, brothers of the Order were seized, tortured, and made to confess to heresies they never believed. The Templar Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, would soon be imprisoned. The Order was falling, but not everything had been lost, because at La Rochelle, something slipped away. There were no witnesses who spoke of the fleet's departure, no letters, no ledgers, no records of destination or intent. All we know is this: 40 ships disappeared from the harbor in the days, or perhaps hours, before Philip's men arrived, and once they were gone, they were never seen again. Imagine it: the clatter of ropes against wooden masts, the quiet commands whispered from captain to crew, horses stabled below, cargo, possibly treasure, relics, documents tied tight within the hulls, all moving in secret, as if the night itself were complicit in their escape. The fog that rolled in from the sea that evening was thick and unnatural. Mariners would later speak of it as if it were alive. A dense, pale curtain that muffled every sound and obscured every shape, swallowing the fleet one ship at a time. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps it was providence. Or perhaps it was something far older something, guarding the Templars in their final hour. As dawn broke the next day, La Rochelle was empty. No sails in sight, no banners fluttering in the breeze. The fleet was gone, vanished, and in their place, only questions. Where did they go? Some believe the ships headed west to Scotland, a land hostile to Philip and outside the reach of Rome's influence. Others whisper of Ireland, or even farther still to the icy reaches of Iceland or across the Atlantic. Centuries before Columbus ever dreamed of the New World. Theories abound, each as tantalizing as the last, but none proven. There is even speculation that the fleet didn't run at all, that it carried something sacred, something the Order had sworn to protect at any cost. Some say it was the Holy Grail, others the Ark of the Covenant. Still others claim it was simply the vast wealth of the Templars, moved swiftly and strategically before the noose could tighten. But what makes this tale more than just legend is the silence that followed. For decades, centuries even, the records remain void. No shipwrecks matching the Templar design, no captured vessels, no letters home, no claims of arrival. It was as if the entire fleet had sailed into another world, into the fog, and never returned. And yet, echoes remained. In Scotland, the sudden appearance of strange knights fighting alongside Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn raised eyebrows. They bore no insignia, answered to no lord, and disappeared just as quickly as they had come. Could these have been Templars from the vanished fleet? In Portugal, the Order of Christ was born from the ashes of the Templars. Its navy would later guide explorers across oceans, but some claim its roots lay in ships that had already crossed the unknown. And in the New World, early explorers reported finding strange symbols carved into rocks crosses unlike any seen before, and stories from native peoples about visitors who came from the sea long ago, clad in white and bearing knowledge. Is it all legend? Perhaps. But the fog that swallowed the Templar fleet has never truly lifted. What we do know is this: the Templars were not fools. They were master planners, builders, and navigators. They had foreseen danger and made preparations. La Rochelle was no accident. It was their key port, their door to the Atlantic, positioned not only for trade, but for escape. The fleet's disappearance may not have been a desperate flight, but a calculated move, a relocation, a rebirth, elsewhere. And so, when we ask, where did they go? We are not merely chasing ghosts. We are following the wake of men who understood secrecy as a form of survival and silence as a kind of shield. Perhaps they reached safe shores and melted into new identities. Perhaps they formed secret societies, guardians of forgotten truths. Or perhaps they wait still, in some distant place, for a world ready to remember what they carried. The Templar fleet sailed into fog, yes, but it also sailed into legend. And tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let your mind sail with them past the harbor lights, beyond the reach of kings and popes, into the quiet, eternal sea where mystery is the only compass, and history the only map that fades. La Rochelle, the last port. La Rochelle was not just a city, it was a sentinel, a place where the stone met the sea, and tides whispered secrets that history was never meant to hear. It sat on the western coast of France like a gatekeeper, guarding the threshold between the known world and the vast unknown of the Atlantic, and in the early 14th century, it became the final breath of a dying order, or the first step of its rebirth. To understand the mystery of the missing Templar fleet, one must first understand La Rochelle. For centuries, this port had been more than just a harbor. It was a hub of maritime power, a place where goods flowed from distant shores, where crusaders launched their voyages, and where whispers of the East arrived before the caravans even reached Paris. The Templars chose it not by accident, but by design. It was their strongest port on the Atlantic. It was also, crucially, beyond the immediate grasp of the French crown. By the early 1300s, the Knights Templar had established themselves as one of the most powerful and secretive organizations in Europe. Their holdings stretched across the continent, their fortresses stood tall in the Holy Land, and their ships sailed freely, ferrying not only men and arms, but messages, treasures, and perhaps things far more sacred. But even the strongest orders can be betrayed from within the shadows. And in King Philip IV of France, the Templars met not an enemy on the battlefield, but a viper in the court. Philip owed the Templar enormous debts. His wars had drained France's coffers, and the knights' growing independence unnerved him. He feared their secrets, he feared their wealth, and above all, he feared their influence, which had begun to rival that of the crown itself. So he did what all tyrants eventually do. He turned the power of the state into a weapon. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, the trap was sprung. In a single coordinated strike, Templar strongholds across France were raided. Brothers were arrested, tortured, and executed, their sacred halls desecrated, their lands seized. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was taken in chains. It was the beginning of the end, or so the king believed. But Philip had underestimated the one piece of the Templar puzzle he could not reach: the fleet. At La Rochelle, 40 ships lay waiting. Not idle, not anchored for trade. These ships were ready. Supplies had been gathered, crews had been prepared. Horses, arms, grain, barrels of water, everything needed for long voyages. And this raises the most haunting question. Did the Templars know? Did they foresee the betrayal? Had word reached La Rochelle days before the arrests began? Or were their preparations born not from foresight, but from a standing plan and escape, always ready, should the world turn against them? We do not know for sure. No records remain, but something happened in La Rochelle that defies explanation. In the fog of that October, the Templar fleet vanished. One might expect chaos sails flapping, men shouting, urgency in the air. But no such stories were told. Instead, what we find in scattered accounts is silence. Eerie, deliberate silence, the kind that suggests planning, not panic. It is said that when royal agents arrived at the harbor, the docks were empty, not just of ships, but of evidence. No ropes left swinging, no horseshoe prints in the mud, no crates left behind in haste. Only the salt air and the slow breath of the sea. La Rochelle, that last port, had become a memory. And yet, the mystery deepens. Because this was no ordinary fleet. Templar ships were built for strength and speed. Some were warships galley-style, with oarsmen and reinforced hulls. Others were merchant vessels, large enough to carry dozens of men or tons of cargo. And the Templars, unlike other religious orders, trained their own sailors. They were not passengers in the maritime world, they were masters of it. So what did these 40 ships carry? Many believe they bore the material wealth of the Order gold, silver, relics, perhaps even forbidden texts that had never seen the light of day. Others speak in more hushed tones, of the Grail, of the Ark, of something too dangerous to be left behind. But perhaps the most powerful cargo aboard those ships was knowledge. The Templars had spent centuries in the East. They built relationships not just with fellow Christians, but with Muslims, Jews, and mystics from lands far beyond the reach of Rome. They had learned things: astronomy, architecture, medicine, philosophy long hidden from the West. It is possible, some say, that their greatest treasure was not buried in gold chests, but bound in scrolls and memory. And so, as those 40 ships slipped past the stone towers of La Rochelle, they may not have been fleeing, they may have been preserving. If we accept this theory that the escape was intentional, prepared, then we must ask, where did they go? La Rochelle faced west into the Atlantic. The first possibility is that they turned north toward the British Isles. Scotland, in particular, stands out. At the time, Scotland was in conflict with both England and France. It was an outlaw kingdom, rebellious and ungoverned. Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated by the Pope. A perfect place, then, for exiled knights to find refuge. And, curiously, Scottish lore speaks of strange knights who arrived on the coast not in conquest but in secrecy. They did not raise flags, they did not speak openly, but they fought at Bannockburn alongside Bruce's men. Their weapons were unlike any others, their presence never explained. Was this the ghost of La Rochelle? Others argue the fleet went farther south, perhaps to Portugal, where the Order of Christ would rise from the ashes of the Templars, or west, across the ocean, to lands uncharted. It is here that legend merges with speculation. The idea that the Templars reached the Americas centuries before Columbus is controversial, but not without whispers. Ancient maps hint at strange knowledge, indigenous carvings bear mysterious symbols, and the timelines, while distant, remain just close enough to stir curiosity. But all of this, the destinations, the cargo, the mission, rests upon the same mystery, the silence of La Rochelle. How could a fleet so large vanish so completely? The answer, perhaps, lies not just in the Templars' seamanship, but in their loyalty. They had centuries to build a network of safe houses, secret allies, and hidden routes. They knew which hands could be trusted and which eyes to avoid. It is possible the escape was known to a few and sworn to secrecy by all. And maybe, just maybe, that silence has endured, not because the fleet was lost, but because it succeeded. Because La Rochelle was not the end. It was the door, the last door out of a burning world, and the first step into a legend that has never truly faded. The possible routes. When 40 ships vanish into the Atlantic mist without a trace, the question that naturally follows is not just why, but where. The Templar fleet did not vanish into oblivion without intention. These were not wayward fishermen or merchant sailors tossed by chance upon a cruel sea. These were disciplined men of war and devotion, trained navigators, stewards of secrets, and masters of evasion. Their disappearance was not a moment of panic, it was a move on a larger chessboard. But what direction did that move take? What routes could they have followed? And what legends do those routes leave behind? Let us unfold the possibilities, like a mariner's map on an old oak table, and let the mind drift with the wind. Route 1, the northern passage towards Scotland. The first and perhaps most frequently whispered path is north towards Scotland. At the time of the fleet's disappearance, Scotland was in rebellion against both the English crown and Rome. Robert the Bruce had been excommunicated by the Pope, but his fight for Scottish independence had not waned. And in the midst of his battle came something unexpected. Not ordinary warriors, but knights in strange armor, whose arrival was sudden and whose departure was even more silent. Some say that at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, 7 years after the fleet vanished, Robert the Bruce was joined by warriors who did not fly any national banner. They fought with unmatched precision and discipline, and when the battle was over, they melted back into the shadows. Could these have been the Templars? Scotland, it must be said, held a curious sympathy for the order. Templar properties were not seized there as they were in France. And the St. Clair family of Rosslyn, the same lineage tied to the famous Rosslyn Chapel, had long been patrons of the Templars. La Rochelle to the west coast of Scotland is a voyage of several days under favorable conditions. The ships could have hugged the coastline, slipping quietly past Brittany and Cornwall, avoiding royal ports and landing under cover of fog. From there, they could disappear into the highlands, into forests older than kings, into halls where oaths are stronger than laws, and some believe they did. In Scottish folklore, there are tales of white-cloaked men who came from the sea, not to conquer, but to hide. They built no castles, they raised no flags, but their presence lingered like a whisper in the stones. And to this day, in certain parts of the Highlands, crosses are carved with symbols never seen in the Church of Rome. Route 2, the western horizon, to the Americas. The second, more daring theory suggests that the fleet sailed west for west. To the modern mind, this may sound like fiction, but we must remember these were the Templars, men who had seen the world from Acre to Aragon. They had maps most others had never dreamed of. And more importantly, they had time. The concept of a spherical Earth was not alien to them. Ancient Phoenicians, Romans, and even Norse mariners had explored beyond the known map. Is it so strange to think the Templars might do the same? The voyage from La Rochelle across the Atlantic is perilous, but not impossible. Trade winds and ocean currents could carry ships to the coastlines of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, or even deeper into the Americas. And indeed, Native American oral histories contain curious echoes of pale-skinned visitors who came bearing symbols of the cross, who neither conquered nor stayed, but came and went like ghosts of the tide. One of the most compelling clues lies in Nova Scotia, at a place called Oak Island. There, for over 200 years, people have been digging for what they call the Money Pita, legendary treasure buried beneath layers of traps and platforms. Theories abound that it holds the lost Templar treasure. Symbols found on stones near the site resemble Masonic designs, which many believe to be spiritual descendants of the Templar. If the fleet did reach the New World, what did they do there? Did they bury their knowledge, their relics, their gold waiting for a time when it could be revealed safely? Did they start a new chapter of their order, in secret, far from the reach of kings and popes? No logs were found, no sails sighted returning. But in the silence, there are suggestions etched in stone, carved in trees, whispered in bloodlines. Route 3, the Iberian Escape Portugal and the Order of Christ. Another plausible route leads south to Portugal. Unlike France, Portugal did not dissolve the Templars in fury. Instead, under King Denis, the order was transformed into a new organization, the Order of Christ. Many former Templar knights were absorbed into this new order, continuing their maritime traditions, rituals, and beliefs under a new name. The Order of Christ would go on to finance some of the greatest explorations of the Age of Discovery, most notably Prince Henry the Navigator, whose voyages reshaped the map of the world. The Templar cross, lightly altered, was carried proudly on the sails of Portuguese ships for centuries. It is possible, then, that the fleet sailed from La Rochelle to Lisbon or Porto, where sympathetic hands helped the knights change their identity but preserve their mission. In Portugal, they could regroup, rebrand, and survive. The sea would remain their sanctuary. The world would soon open to them again under a new banner. This theory has the advantage of being historically grounded. There is no leap into legend here, just a continuity of name, purpose, and maritime power. But what of the fleet? Could it be that those ships were scattered across the Portuguese coast, their contents redistributed, their names altered? A new fleet could be born from an old one quietly, without fanfare. And perhaps that is what happened. Route 4, the Hidden Haven's Mediterranean Secrets. Some believe that rather than sailing north or west, the fleet turned backward, slipping into the Mediterranean, using old Templar ports in Italy, Cyprus, or even the Levant. The Templars had strongholds throughout the Mediterranean. Even after the fall of Acre, remnants of their presence remained hidden coves, trusted allies, secret warehouses. It's possible the fleet broke into smaller squadrons, each taking a different route, each hiding among the ports of friendly lands. Some may have gone as far as Constantinople, or deeper still into the heart of the Byzantine world, where Eastern mysticism met Christian rites. From there, they could vanish into the East, preserved in quiet sanctuaries. The Mediterranean route offers concealment, not conquest. It is a path for those who wish to disappear, not relocate. Route 5, the Phantom Route, nowhere and everywhere. And then there is the strangest theory of all, the one that says the fleet sailed nowhere, or rather, that it never sailed as one. According to this belief, the idea of 40 ships leaving La Rochelle together is a convenient myth. In reality, the fleet may have already been dispersed before the arrests began, ships gone one by one, under different names, to different ports. A slow vanishing, not a dramatic exodus. This would explain the lack of sightings, the lack of witnesses, no great departure. Just silence. A quiet tide pulling a great fleet beneath the surface of history. Under this theory, some ships went to Scotland, some to Portugal, Some were scuttled at sea to erase trails. Some, perhaps, never left at all, hidden in coves, disguised, waiting for the call that never came. If true, then the mystery is even more elusive. For the fleet becomes not a thing of sails and wood, but of whispers and memory. In the end, only the sea knows. The sea is a jealous keeper of secrets. Its tides erase footprints, its depths cradle wrecks in silence, and somewhere, perhaps, beneath waves that stretch beyond horizon and time, the truth still drifts. Did the Templars reach another land? Did they bury something too powerful to be seen? Did they simply survive silently, secretly in shadows we've yet to notice? Or did they sail into legend, because it was safer than staying in history? These are the possible routes. But in the stillness of the ocean wind, we must remember, routes are not just paths across the sea, they are choices, escapes, hopes, and perhaps the greatest treasure the Templars carried was the freedom to choose their fate. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the lanterns on those ships glowing softly through the mist. 40 vessels sliding silently across a silver sea, vanishing, not because they were lost, but because they knew exactly where they were going. The treasure question. When 40 ships vanish under moonlight, slipping away before dawn, leaving no ripples, no sails on the horizon, and no clues, behind there is one question that echoes louder than all others. What were they carrying? It is the heart of the Templar mystery, the flame that has kept scholars, seekers, and dreamers awake for centuries. What was so precious that the Order chose to entrust it to the sea? What had to be protected so fiercely that an entire fleet was prepared in silence? Was it gold? Was it power? Was it knowledge? Or was it something far more sacred, something the world was never meant to see? Tonight, as you drift deeper into the quiet, let us follow this question not to answers, but to the edges of possibility. The wealth of a kingdom. Let us begin with what we know. The Knights Templar were not merely warriors. They were bankers, landlords, and financiers. Over nearly 2 centuries, they amassed vast wealth through donations, military campaigns, and clever administration. Kings entrusted them with royal treasuries. Pilgrims stored their fortunes with them before crossing into the Holy Land. Nobles deeded estates to the Order in exchange for prayers and protection. At their peak, the Templars were said to own thousands of properties across Europe, castles, farms, vineyards, towns. Their coffers overflowed with coin silver and gold in a time when both were rare. They minted their own currency. They loaned to monarchs, and they answered only to the Pope. But when King Philip IV turned on the Order, one of his chief motives was greed. He was deeply in debt to the Templars, and he believed their wealth would solve his kingdom's financial crisis. Yet when he seized their strongholds, he found almost nothing. Vaults were empty, chests missing, ledgers erased or burned. It was as if the Templars had anticipated the betrayal and moved their riches before it came. And so, the theory arises, the fleet carried it all. 40 ships, each laden with gold, silver, jewels, relics, and scrolls. The fortune of a kingdom vanished into the Atlantic. If true, then somewhere, hidden in a cave, buried beneath the forgotten chapel, or lost in the depths of the Seas, one of the greatest treasures the world has never found. But gold does not stay hidden forever. Which leads us to a deeper mystery. The Grail, the Ark, and the secrets of Solomon. The Templars were not just rich in coin. They were rich in legend. And some of those legends are darker, stranger, and far more powerful than gold. One of the most enduring is this. The Templars found something beneath the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Shortly after their founding, the first Templars based themselves on the ancient Temple Mount. For 9 years, they dug beneath the ruins. No one knows exactly what they unearthed, but something changed after that. Their power grew swiftly. Their relationship with the church became unique. Their secrecy deepened. Some say they found ancient text scrolls lost since the time of Christ. Others believe they discovered the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred chest said to house the tablets of Moses, capable of bringing both divine favor and terrible wrath. And then, there is the Grail. The Holy Grail, sometimes imagined as a cup, sometimes as a stone, sometimes as secret bloodline, has long been entwined with the Templar mythos. Some say they were its guardians, sworn to protect it from all earthly powers, that when persecution came, they placed it aboard their fleet, ensuring it would sail beyond reach. But what is the Grail? Is it an object, a symbol, a truth? One theory holds that it is knowledge, dangerous knowledge, proof of Christ's human life, or a sacred lineage that would threaten the very foundations of church authority. If the Templars held such a secret, it would explain much. The silence, the secrecy, the sudden fury with which both king and pope turned on them. And if they did flee with it, it would not be to hoard or use but to hide, to keep safe what could destroy. Perhaps then, the treasure was not a thing but an idea. And the fleet, its final shield, the library theory knowledge as treasure. In recent decades, scholars have proposed a quieter, more subtle theory, that the Templars' greatest treasure was their knowledge. Imagine centuries of crusades, diplomacy, interaction with Islamic scholars, Jewish mystics, Eastern monks. The Templars were uniquely positioned to learn, to record, to translate. They may have possessed lost gospels, forbidden books, or ancient maps, astronomical charts, medical practices, hidden histories. Their libraries, if preserved, would rival the greatest in the world. And unlike gold, knowledge is light to carry but heavy with consequence. It is possible that when danger came, the Order prioritized these scrolls above all else, that their fleet was not filled with coins, but with parchment sealed in leather, guarded as carefully as any relic, and that somewhere today, deep in the vaults of a forgotten monastery, or beneath the stones of a coastal ruin, those pages still sleep, waiting. The disappearance of records, a clue in silence. What makes the treasure question even more enigmatic is this: no records survived. The Templars were meticulous. They documented everything: ship manifests, property records, donations, military logs. But when the fleet disappeared, the paper trail ended. It is as if someone burned every clue, or better yet, ensured none existed. Did they erase themselves? Did they scatter the treasure across different continents, each ship with a piece of the whole? Was there even a treasure at Alior? Was the idea of it planted to distract, to mislead? After all, what better way to ensure secrecy than to make people search in the wrong place? Theories of a living legacy. Some believe the treasure never stopped moving, that it was not buried, but passed down, through secret orders, through bloodlines, through symbols carved into stone and code. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, even elements of the Renaissance Church have all been suspected of holding fragments of the Templar legacy. In architecture, in ritual, in iconography, the signs persist: the rose, the cross, the compass, the square. Could it be that the treasure was not hoarded but dispersed, that what the Templars preserved was never meant to be found but to inspire? In that sense, the fleet may have succeeded beyond imagination. They did not vanish, they transformed. The real treasure, the question itself. And perhaps now, as sleep takes you gently into its tides, you begin to see what the treasure truly was. Not gold, not relics, not scrolls, but the question itself. For centuries, the missing Templar fleet has made us wonder, made us look backward and forward, made us doubt what we know. It has whispered through generations, there is more to history, more to faith, more to power, more to ourselves. The treasure, then, may be this, the mystery that never dies, the dream of a fleet slipping into fog, carrying something too sacred to name, and the haunting thought that somewhere, just beyond the reach of reason, it still waits, not to be found, but to be remembered. Templars in disguise. The waves may have swallowed the Templar fleet, the fog may have shrouded their destination, and the world may believe they vanished. But what if they didn't? What if they never truly disappeared, but simply changed their robes, altered their names, and continued their mission in the shadows? What if the Templars have walked among us all along, not as knights in armor, but as merchants, monks, navigators, artists, and thinkers, disguised not by masks, but by time? This is the story not of disappearance, but of transformation. Let us begin. The death of an order, or the birth of a new one. When King Philip IV of France moved against the Knights Templar in 1307, his aim was not merely to dismantle the order, it was to erase it, to purge every trace of their influence, their structure, their power. But such erasures rarely work as planned. The Templars were not a simple brotherhood. They were a network rooted deep, spread wide. Their members were trained, educated, and adaptable. They were multilingual, often well-versed in law, engineering, navigation, finance. To believe that such minds, such a system, simply ceased to exist is to underestimate both their capability and their will. Instead, as the visible structure fell, something quieter took shape. The Templars, some say, did not die. They simply took off the cross. The Order of Christ. A new face in Portugal. The Templars found sanctuary. King Dinis of Portugal had long respected the order. When Pope Clement V issued the Bull Vox in Excelso in 1312, officially dissolving the Templars, Dinis did not destroy them. Instead, he transformed them. With papal approval, he created a new military religious order, the Order of Christ. It was, in many ways, the Templars reborn, same members, same properties, same mission, but under a new name. The cross they wore changed in shape, but the spirit behind it remained. The Order of Christ would go on to play a vital role in the age of exploration. Their emblem was etched into the sails of ships that crossed oceans, carried by men like Henry the Navigator, himself a grand master of the order. So perhaps the Templars did not sail west in secret. They sailed openly, under new flags, guiding the course of human history, while the world slept on their true identity. The Freemasons' heirs of hidden knowledge. Then there is the question of the Freemasons. An enigmatic brotherhood, builders of cathedrals, keepers of ritual, spread across continents, bound by secret signs and allegories of light, geometry, and truth. Could they be the spiritual successors of the Templars? Many believe so. The transition, if it occurred, would not have been immediate. It would have taken generations, but the similarities are hard to ignore. The emphasis on secrecy, the use of sacred geometry, the reverence for Solomon's temple, the rituals of initiation, mirroring those whispered to have existed within the Templar ranks. Freemasonic legends speak of lost builders, sacred tools, and hidden masters. Some say that Templar survivors fled to Scotland where the persecution never reached, and over time merged with local stonemason guilds. The knowledge of stone met the discipline of sword, and a new lineage was born, one that hid in plain sight. Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland is often cited as the bridge between the two worlds. Filled with strange carvings, Masonic symbols, and possible depictions of New World flora before Columbus ever set sail, the chapel is a mystery in stone. Did the Templars lay its foundation, or did their descendants, disguised as monks, navigators, and merchants? Not every Templar needed a new order to survive. Some simply blended into the world. A knight trained in finance could become a banker. A Templar familiar with herbal medicine and Eastern teachings could become a healer, a monk, a teacher. A captain of ships could easily become a navigator for the rising merchant empires of Europe, trading not just goods, but knowledge across oceans. In the centuries following their suppression, Europe saw a surge in mysterious figures, men of deep insight, sudden wealth, uncanny connections, sometimes admired, often feared. They moved through courts and ports, never tied to one place, yet always leaving a trail of wonder. Some wore plain robes, some designed maps, some advised kings from behind veils of anonymity. Were they scattered Templars, or were they merely inspired by them? The line between history and rumor grows thin. Symbols in the shadows. Even if the Templars vanished, their symbols did not. Across Europe and far beyond we find the Red Cross, the double-barred cross, the eight-pointed star, the equal-armed sword. We find labyrinthine floor plans in old cathedrals, tracing sacred geometry taught in the East. We find compasses and squares etched into stones long before Freemasonry made them famous. Even in America, long before it was named, there are stones in New England carved with strange crosses, coins of European origin predating Columbus, legends of visitors from across the sea who taught, healed, and vanished. Did the Templars leave these signs as breadcrumbs, or did those who followed them do so? Perhaps disguise was not just about survival, it was about preservation, preserving something older than kings, older than cathedrals. The legacy lives in silence. What makes this story endure is not proof, but possibility. It is the idea that the greatest truths are not shouted, but whispered. That sometimes the most powerful movements wear no crown, raise no banners, and build no fortress. They exist in quiet rituals, in unspoken brotherhoods, in stories passed between generations beside the fire. The Templars may have died as an order, but they lived on as an idea, disguised not in costume, but in code. They became architects, not of buildings, but of belief. Their swords became compasses, their prayers became philosophies, their ships became myths. And the question that haunts us still is not, where did they go, but rather, what have they become? A whisper, not a trumpet tonight. As you close your eyes, imagine one of them walking beside you on a quiet street. Not in armor, not with banners, but in a wool cloak, a quiet gaze, a presence you feel more than see. Perhaps he carries a book. Perhaps she carries a candle. They are there, in the edges of the world, tending something old, something sacred. And if you listen, you may hear the faintest whisper behind their steps, a whisper that says, "We never left." Echoes across oceans. They vanished into the mist. 40 ships, no sails spotted again, no bodies found, no letters home, no cries for rescue. But if you stand long enough on the edge of a quiet shore, or walk through the ruins of ancient chapels, or run your hand over carvings left on rocks far from Europe's reach, you may hear something, not voices, not words, but echoes, faint, scattered echoes drifting across oceans and centuries. Whispers of a fleet that never returned, but never truly left. This is the story of those echoes, the stones that speak North America. Before Columbus, the story begins where it should not, on the shores of the New World, long before it was known as such. In Nova Scotia, there is a small island known as Oak Island, a place where generations of treasure hunters have dug endlessly into the earth, seeking something buried far below. Some say it's pirate gold. Others say it's a trap-filled vault of ancient knowledge. But at the heart of it lies a deeper theory that the Templars reached this place long before Columbus sailed west. Strange stone markings have been found on the island symbols, resembling those used by Freemasons, who themselves are linked to the legacy of the Templars. And in local Mi'kmaq legends, there are whispers of pale-skinned men who arrived from the sea long ago, dressed not in conquest, but in reverence. They came, they built, and they vanished. Could these stories be echoes of the Templar fleet? Further south, in Newport, Rhode Island, there stands a curious structure known as the Newport Tower, a round stone building with architectural features that bear a striking resemblance to medieval churches in Europe, particularly those built by the Templars. Though many scholars attribute it to colonial times, others argue its layout, orientation, and design point to a much earlier origin. And still farther west in Minnesota, the Kensington runestone was unearthed in 1898. Covered in runes, it claims to be a marker left by Norse explorers in the 14th century. Some say it's a hoax. Others believe it to be real and perhaps a message from a splintered crew of Templar, connected seafarers who ventured deep inland. Stone does not speak easily, but when it does not lie. Sacred symbols and silent builders. Across the Americas, there are patterns some seen, some overlooked. Certain ancient sites in South America display astronomical alignments and construction techniques that some believe were beyond the capabilities of the local civilizations. While this may be credited to native geniuses, it rightly should there are also symbols etched into stones, particularly in Peru and Bolivia, that echo the crosses and stars used in Templar heraldry. It's not proof, but it's unsettling. In Brazil, along the coast, there are stories of strange visitors who arrived in ships unlike the Portuguese fleet's visitors who spoke no known tongue, left no written trail, but passed down methods of measuring stars and building with geometry. And within the oral traditions of some Native American tribes, there are references to white-robed men who came bearing knowledge, healed the sick, and left gifts books, tools, ideas. They came from the sea and vanished just as quietly. No graves, no relics, just stories, Zikos. And yet, what are stories if not the way civilizations remember what cannot be written? Oceans as highways, not walls. To the medieval mind, the ocean was a boundary. A dark unknown, a place where monsters waited, where ships vanished into the edge of the map. But to the Templars' seasoned navigators, disciplined and daring, the sea was not a wall, it was a highway. La Rochelle, their last known port, faced the open Atlantic. And their ships were not mere transports, they were crafted for endurance, with knowledge drawn from the shipbuilders of the East, the merchants of Venice, and even the Moors. If any group in the 14th century had the ability, the courage, and the maps to cross the ocean, it was the Templars. And if they did, they would have left no trail, no letters, no return. Because the goal was not discovery, it was disappearance. To find a place untouched by kings, untouched by Rome, untouched by betrayal. A New Jerusalem, across the sea. Whispers in exploration. 2 centuries after the Templars vanished, the world changed. The age of exploration began. Ships flew new flags, carried new names, but sometimes old intentions. Christopher Columbus, in letters to his patrons, hinted that he knew of lands to the west. Not guessed. Knew. He spoke of old maps, of fragments of information passed down. He sailed under Spanish banners, but many of the symbols on his sails and many of the men on his crew were connected to secret orders. Was Columbus following a path already taken? Henry the Navigator, Prince of Portugal, and Grand Master of the Order of Christ, the Templar successor sent fleets to Africa, India, and Brazil. On their sails flew the Red Cross, not unlike that of the Templars. He spoke of sacred missions, spiritual goals beyond trade. Were these missions echoes? Did the maps they used contain lines drawn in ink centuries earlier, when the Templars sailed into the mist? History records the age of discovery with fanfare. But beneath that applause, there are faint footsteps, those who came before and told no one. Echoes in architecture and faith. If the Templars did cross the ocean, they may not have built empires, but they may have planted seeds. Seeds in stone, seeds in symbol, seeds in thought. In the Andes, in the Amazon, in the remote hills of Mexico, there are chapels and altars where the cross predates the missionary, where rituals blend Christianity with symbols unknown in the Vatican. In parts of Ethiopia, where the Templars once had secret connections, there are churches carved directly into rock, mimicking forms seen in Peru. Coincidence or memory passed through trade. And in the Caribbean, certain island rituals involve knights, swords, and chants that do not trace back to Spanish or French settlers. These are not conquests, they are imprints. Ghostly impressions left by hands that did not wish to rule, but to preserve. The ocean remembers. For centuries, the oceans have carried secrets, and in their depths lie things we've yet to discover. Modern sonar has uncovered shipwrecks buried beneath coral, their wood long gone, but their structure intact. In the mid-Atlantic, archaeologists have found remains of ships with designs that don't match known fleets. Some with hulls deeper than needed for trade, others with reinforced keels suggesting long voyages. In the sands off the coasts of Nova Scotia, metal detectors occasionally reveal coins with strange markings. Not English, not Spanish, not easily placed. Each artifact is an echo, a murmur, a suggestion, and perhaps the fleet never meant to be found. Not fully. Perhaps it was scattered, each ship sent to a different place, carrying not treasure, but knowledge, hope, continuation, like seeds blown across the sea. You cannot silence the sea. The Templars may have been erased from the scrolls of kings, their grand master burned, their strongholds dismantled, their banners lowered. But they sailed into legend, and legend, like the sea, cannot be silenced. So if you ever find yourself walking a quiet beach, where the only sound is the distant crash of waves and the cry of wind through pine, stop, listen, not with your ears, but with the quiet inside you. And you might hear it, the sound of sails in the mist, the echo of oars moving in rhythm, the creak of wooden hulls carrying a hope too sacred to die. A fleet, still moving across oceans we cannot chart. A truth, still waiting in silence. The fleet's purpose. The ocean, vast and eternal, does not easily reveal her secrets, nor do the men who trusted her with their fate. When 40 Templar ships slipped away from the port of La Rochelle in 1307 quietly, without trumpet or trail, it was easy to assume they fled. Fled from persecution, fled from death, fled from betrayal. But perhaps they weren't running from something. Perhaps they were sailing toward something. A destination, a destiny, a purpose. In the stillness of this night, let us drift beyond the surface of escape and ask the question that has haunted historians, dreamers, and seekers alike. What was the true purpose of the missing Templar fleet? A calculated departure, not a desperate flight. To begin, we must remember, the Knights Templar were not novices. They were seasoned strategists, meticulous planners. Their code was discipline, their creed was precision. For the fleet to vanish so completely, so quietly, it had to be more than reaction, it had to be preparation. There is growing evidence that the Templars may have anticipated the betrayal of King Philip IV. Warnings from within the French court, coded letters passed from hand to hand, movements of gold, relics, and documents in the weeks prior. The gathering of the fleet at La Rochelle was not chaos, it was coordination. But if they were prepared, then what exactly were they preparing for? Surely not just escape. Templars did not live to hide. They lived to serve a mission, preserving a sacred trust. One of the strongest theories is that the fleet carried something sacred. Whether it was the fabled Holy Grail, lost scrolls from the Temple of Solomon, or heretical truths hidden from the Church, many believe the Templars had in their possession knowledge or relics too powerful, too dangerous, or too sacred to fall into the hands of kings. Perhaps the fleet's purpose was not to flee with these treasures, but to guard them, to sail them far from danger, to hide them in lands untouched by papal law or royal decree. In this light, each ship becomes not an escape vessel, but a moving sanctuary, a floating shrine carrying the hopes of a brotherhood sworn to protect something older than cathedrals, deeper than doctrines. And if so, then the silence that followed was not failure, but faithfulness. The mission reborn in new lands. Another possibility rises with the winds of history. What if the fleet did not vanish at all, but simply changed direction and changed form? Some ships may have sailed to Scotland, where the Church's influence was weak and the Order could find allies. There, perhaps, they merged with local guilds, quietly planting the seeds of Freemasonry, preserving their rights in stone and symbol rather than sword and shield. Others may have gone to Portugal, where the Order was reborn as the Order of Christ, continuing the mission under a new name, shaping the maritime power that would later launch the Age of Exploration. Still others, perhaps the most secretive, sailed west into the unknown, not in search of land, but in service to a vow, to carry their message, their mystery, their light into the night of the uncharted world. If this is true, then the fleet's purpose was not protection alone. It was continuation, a rebirth of mission, far from persecution, in places where the Order could live again hidden, but not gone. A pilgrimage beyond the map. There is a more spiritual theory, one rarely spoken, but deeply compelling. Some suggest the fleet was not just preserving relics or knowledge, it was searching for something, a holy place, a forgotten promise, a land that older maps had hinted at, marked only with ancient symbols or whispered names. A new Jerusalem, a place where the ideals of the Templar spirity, protection, justice, faith, could finally take root without corruption. Some early Templar writings speak of the idea that the Holy Land was not just in Palestine, but within the heart of man, and perhaps, physically, waiting somewhere else. Maybe the fleet was sailing not to escape history, but to fulfill prophecy, to find a place where the mission of the temple could begin again, not in stone, but in spirit, silent vessels for a louder future. There is a curious pattern that emerges when you trace the movement of history after 1307. The flame of the Templars did not go out, it simply dimmed, shifted, and reappeared in strange places, in the architecture of hidden chapels, in the symbols of exploration, in the founding ideals of secret brotherhoods, in the rituals of those who called themselves builders, but whispered oaths in languages older than their time. Could it be that the fleet's purpose was to plant these echoes, not to return as conquerors, but to inspire, to guide from behind the veil, to become architects not of kingdoms, but of ideas? If so, then the Templars succeeded beyond imagination. Their fleet became not a military force, but a vessel of legacy. And what greater purpose could there be than to outlive death itself? The greatest mission, disappearance. And then, there is one final possibility, that the fleet's purpose was to disappear. Completely, permanently, intentionally, to erase all trace, to become myth. Because in myth, there is power, there is longevity, there is safety. Perhaps the ships were never meant to arrive. Perhaps they were meant to dissolve into legend. Because legend cannot be imprisoned, it cannot be burned at the stake, it cannot be silenced. In that case, the fleet becomes not a fleet, but a symbol of defiance, of dignity, of devotion. And the Templars themselves become more than men. They become a whisper in the world's long dream, a purpose that lives on. Tonight, as the world grows still and your breath deepens into silence, imagine those ships again. Not as vessels of fear, but of faith. Not running from flames, but carrying the last embers of a sacred fire. They may never have reached port. They may have broken on strange shores. Or perhaps they still sail somewhere. But more likely, they completed their journey. Not because they were found, but because their purpose was fulfilled. Because today we still ask, we still wonder, we still remember. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. The return in symbol. The fleet vanished. The knights fell. The banners were torn, and the crosses lowered. But sometimes, a return does not come with noise. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, carved in stone, whispered through rituals, painted in light that falls through stained glass. The Templars may have vanished as a name, but not as a presence, not as a force, because long after their ships disappeared into the Atlantic mist, their symbols began to reappear, not in the halls of power, but in corners of cathedrals, on the ceilings of lodges, in the geometry of cities, on the sails of explorers, in the pages of art and code. The fleet returned not in form, but in meaning. Tonight, let us drift through those symbols. Let us follow the trail left not by footprints, but by echoes in stone and light. The cross that changed shape, not meaning. The most iconic symbol of the Templars was the red cross, a simple equal-armed cross worn on a white mantle, symbolizing purity through sacrifice, discipline through devotion. After their suppression, this cross did not vanish. In Portugal, the newly formed Order of Christ bore a red cross, strikingly similar, slightly flared at the ends, placed boldly on the sails of caravels that would cross the Atlantic and reach the corners of the world. Explorers like Vasco da Gama and Pedro Alvarez Cabral sailed under its shadow. Was this the return, not of the fleet, but of the spirit that had once guided it? Many believe that Portugal preserved not just the Templars' naval knowledge, but their ideals reclothed in royal colors, yet whispering of a deeper vow. Even Columbus, in his voyages funded by Spain, sailed with crosses etched into his sails. Some have argued those two bore the Templar trace, if not in design, then in intent. Columbus spoke cryptically of hidden maps, of inherited knowledge, of a mission not entirely his own. Could the fleet's knowledge have lived on, not in a hidden cave, but in lines drawn on parchment? And did the cross guide them still? The compass and the square. Elsewhere in Europe, as the centuries turned, another set of symbols began to surface, not in ports, but in lodges. The compass, the square, the all-seeing eye, and the blazing star symbols now associated with Freemasonry. Many historians trace the Masons to stonemason guilds, but others suggest a parallel lineage, that after the suppression of the Templars, surviving members merged with local builders, embedding their codes and rituals in architecture instead of arms. Templar and Masonic symbology overlap in striking ways. Reverence for Solomon's Temple, the initiation rites, the numerical codes, the layers of secrecy, the language of light and geometry. Templar presence was built into cathedrals. Masonic principles were built into cities. Perhaps then the return was not to land, but to form, not to banners, but to blueprints. The Rosslyn Mystery. Among the most haunting echoes of the Templar legacy is Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Built in the 15th century by the St. Clair family, long rumored to be connected to the Templars, Rosslyn is an enigma in stone. Its pillars, arches, and carvings contain symbols from Christianity, Judaism, Celtic lore, and possibly Native American plants centuries before Europe officially discovered the New World. Could Rosslyn have been built using knowledge brought back by the missing fleet? Could its detailed symbolism be the silent scripture of a vanished brotherhood? In the shadows of its stonework, some see stars, crosses, and even keys, not literal, but conceptual, waiting to be turned by eyes that know how to read them. Rosslyn does not declare. It invites, just like the Templars once did. The double cross and the hidden codes. Elsewhere, the double-barred crossa, lesser known but potent Templar symbol, found its way into royal coats of arms, especially in Eastern Europe. In Hungary, Slovakia, Lithuania, and parts of Russia, the double cross became a mark of faith, but also sovereignty. Was this coincidence, or did messengers from the fleet make their way inland into the courts of kings and the sanctuaries of monasteries, offering wisdom in exchange for silence? Even in currency, curious symbols emerge. Old coins minted with 8-pointed stars, with compasses, with hidden numbers. Masonic, Templar, or simply inspired by something deeper that once sailed west under cover of mist. The truth hides in the detail, as it always has. Templar imagery in the New World. And then there is the Americas. In New Mexico, Peru, Nova Scotia, and even deep in Appalachia, old stones bear symbols that feel strangely familiar, crosses carved too deliberately, stars that match Masonic geometry, and layouts of ruins that seem to mirror European sacred sites. In Native American lore, some tribes tell of skywalkers or sunmen who came from the sea nut in conquest but in peace, bearing no guns, no flags, only wisdom and light. Were these encounters with shipwrecked survivors or with planned emissaries? In parts of Brazil, Templar crosses appear in colonial-era churches, though officially, the order never existed there. In Mexico, explorers found pre-Hispanic murals with red crosses painted long before missionaries arrived. Are these merely coincidences of shape, or footprints left by a fleet that never returned but never truly disappeared? A return, written in silence. And yet, perhaps the greatest return was not in symbol, but in principle. The Templars were not just knights. They were protectors of pilgrims, keepers of sacred trust. They valued discipline, humility, devotion, and light in every form. Long after their ships were lost to the sea, their code remained. In the laws of knightly conduct, in the architecture of justice, in the formation of chivalric orders, in the birth of constitutional ideals, in revolutions that demanded freedom of belief. Even the founding of the United States, steeped in Masonic imagery and ideals, bears traces of that older code, silent but resilient. Was this, too, the fleet's purpose? To sow ideas, not empires, to plant symbols, not flags, to return not as conquerors but as concepts that shape the world without drawing a sword. A whisper stronger than a shout. So now, as the tide of thought pulls us gently into stillness, consider this. Perhaps the Templars did return, not in sails or armor, but in the symbols that still decorate our churches, our currency, our cities, in the codes carved into stone and memory, in the dreams that still speak of ships in the mist. They returned in every artist who sketches a cross with equal arms, in every architect who builds with golden ratios and sacred proportions, in every seeker who pursues truth behind veils. Their ships may rest on the ocean floor, but their symbols still float in the collective soul of humanity. Because symbols do not sink. They rise, and they whisper still. Where did they go? It is the question that lingers like mist upon the sea. Where did they go? The Knights Templar once feared, once rivered, stood on the edge of annihilation in October 1307. Their castles fell, their brothers were seized, their Grand Master imprisoned. But in the harbor of La Rochelle, their final secret was already leaving the shore. 40 ships, ready, supplied, crewed, and then gone. gone without witnesses, gone without a trace. And so the question echoes again. Where did they go? Some say they turned north, to the rugged coasts of Scotland, beyond the reach of the Pope, into a land at war with the English crown. There, hidden in the Highlands or sheltered by clans sympathetic to their cause, the Templars may have melted into legend. Years later, at the Battle of Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce would gain a mysterious victory helped, some claim, by strange knights who appeared only once, and then never again. Others say the ships moved south, slipping quietly along the coast to Portugal, where the Templar Order would be reborn under a new name, the Order of Christ. There, in royal favor, they would carry on their mission in secret, planting the seeds of a new age, the Age of Discovery. The red cross that once graced a white Templar mantle would reappear on the sails of caravels bound for Africa, India, and beyond. And then, there are those who believe the fleet did not stay near Europe at all. They believe the Templars sailed west, into the vast, unknown Atlantic, to lands beyond the horizon, lands barely whispered of in ancient maps and forbidden texts. Long before Columbus, long before charts and compasses showed the way, they believed the Templars crossed the sea, to America, to refuge, to rebirth. In Nova Scotia, strange stone carvings appear where no European hand should have reached. In Rhode Island, a tower with unusual design echoes Templar architecture. In the tales of native tribes, stories remain of pale-skinned men who came not to conquer, but to teach, to heal, and to vanish. Did the Templars become ghosts in a new land? Or did they never land at all? Perhaps the fleet split. Some ships went north, some went south, others scattered. Perhaps they dispersed intentionally, each vessel, carrying a piece of a sacred treasure, a fragment of truth, a memory meant to be protected, not discovered. Perhaps they sank. Perhaps storms claimed them. Pirates intercepted them. Or the sea, always hungry for mystery, swallowed their story forever. And yet, if they were lost, why has no wreck been found? Why no record of ships matching their size or design? Why no survivors? Why no confession? Because perhaps the Templars didn't simply vanish. Perhaps they became something else, a symbol, a myth, a whisper that still stirs the hearts of those who question too deeply. Because maybe, just maybe, the fleet's destination was not a place, but a purpose. A place where kings could not reach, where betrayal could not follow. A place of silence, secrecy, and sacred vow. And if they reached it, wherever it may be, then they succeeded. Because centuries have passed, empires have risen and fallen. And still we ask, where did they go? The sea keeps her secrets well. Ships vanish. Names fade. Time blurs the line between what is lost and what is hidden. And yet, some stories refuse to sleep. The Templar fleet, 40 ships strong, left no known wake. No sails were ever seen on the horizon again. No letters returned. No bones found. But in the stillness of history, in the quiet corners of cathedrals and the symbols etched into old stone, their presence lingers. Maybe they reached a new land. Maybe they became something else. Or maybe they became the story itself. Because sometimes the most powerful legacies are not carved in monuments or written in records, but whispered through the centuries, like a prayer or a promise. Thank you for joining us on this journey not just across oceans, but across wonder. If this story stirred something in you, let it stay a while. And if you'd like to explore more mysteries, more forgotten corners of history, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe, rest, return. Until then, may your nights be peaceful. May your dreams be curious, and may the whispers of the past guide you gently into sleep. Good night.